study,
and play come together on a Windows 11 PC.
And for a limited time, college students get
The best of both worlds.
Get the Unreal College Deal. Everything you need to study and play with select Windows 11 PCs. Eligible students get a year of Microsoft 365 Premium and a year of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with a custom color Xbox wireless controller. Learn more at windows.com/student offer. While supplies last. Ends June 30th. Terms at aka.ms/collegepc.
Good sleep is everything. That's why Ollie's Science Back Support is made with a blend of melatonin and L-theanine for both kiddos and grown-ups. So when your mind won't switch off, you've got something that can help. Your racing thoughts and restless nights won't stand a chance. Find Ollie Sleep Solutions for the whole family at ollie.com. That's OLLY.com.
Welcome back to the Epic Universal Podcast. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and this is the podcast where we cover the latest Universal news, rumors, and history. And as always, I'm joined by Eric Hersey. How are you today, Eric?
We're doing good. Last week of school, so we just finished up with one of the kids' field days, and the other kid is hammering out her finals this week. So I'm going to get some free time back. I'm no longer the bus driver. I'll get to actually get a couple hours back in my day. So I'm excited about that.
Well, that said, though, that aren't you and Lauren in June, you have 2 trips going at least?
Oh, there's lots of trips coming up. The next 3 months, we're going to be doing something Disney or Universal related. So we'll have lots to report on. So it's all good news for everybody that's listening. Don't worry about us being all busy and having to figure that stuff out, but we'll make it happen.
Okay.
We won't skip a beat.
Well, there we go. All right. Well, why don't we plunge into this week's show then? Though we should mention that since you previously asked folks to post reviews of this podcast, we've had a number of Epic Universal podcast listeners who were kind enough to do that. Who are we shining a spotlight on today?
Hey, we're going to shout a spotlight on our buddy Nick Driss. Nice Patreon supporter. We're always communicating back in there, but left us a nice review, and it says, Jim and Hersey superfan. What I appreciate about this podcast is that Eric is first and foremost a Disney theme park fan, so his point of view on all things Universal theme park is through a comparison lens. I always agree with his opinions and takes, so I'll follow his advice whenever I get to Epic. In general, Jim Hill's podcast series are literally my NPR. So, Nick, thank you very much. That's
very sweet. Okay.
Yeah, we also got Renfred wrote in, and this one is nice. It's love the show. Jim and Eric are fun to listen to and keep the show moving along with a great pace. Jim is an incredible source of history and facts and amazing behind-the-scenes stories and all things related to theme parks. The show feels like you're sitting around a table with good friends having fun times. So that and then what go on, we do have some requests here. One is to talk more about the Monster Cafe and some of the Monster movies. So I think we can probably do that. But either right, Renfred, thank you for that so much. And for everyone else out there, like we said, if you keep writing, we'll keep reading them. So if you want to go to jimhillmedia.com/epic, it'll take you right to the Apple review page. And thanks again to Nick and Renfred.
Okay. And speaking of what Renfred mentioned, didn't we have an image from our Eye in the Sky bioreconstruct of the trio of Universal Monster Cafe statues? Aren't they actually out back behind Darkmoor, Dark Universe? I mean, I remember a shot of them being on the ground out there.
Yeah, they were there in the spot of the so-called Creature of Black Lagoon ride, which is really interesting. I didn't put it in the notes today, but it's worth noting that there has been a new permit coming up that is talking about building in that location. So I don't have all the details per se, and it seemed like the details were a little fishy in terms of there wasn't saying what it was going to be, an attraction or this or that. But yeah, that location back there, that's where they were sitting, and it looks like there is going to be some movement here in the near future in Epic for that. Not in the news, but we'll have more coming in the weeks when I scratch more of that and find more out.
Okay. All right. Well, but before we get to the news proper on this week's podcast, we, of course, have to acknowledge our sponsor, and that is UnlockMagic.com. And if you're planning a trip to Universal Orlando or the Walt Disney World Resort, check out Unlock Magic. Listeners to the Epic Universal podcast are saving up to 12% on theme park tickets and now have the ability to purchase Express Pass through Unlock Magic, saving even more money. So Be sure and visit unlockmagic.com and save today. So, again, we're recording this last week of May 2026. But Universal, they're already hard at work at Halloween Horror Nights, which is what? Some 5 months ahead. They started in August. Who are we kidding? But we now officially know about our first house, right?
We do. We have the first announcement, and it's funny because as soon as we record, I'm sure there's an announcement going on real time right now because it's the moment we record, they announced the first house. I'm like, well, we'll have to catch it on next week's show. But no, the Sinners house, the haunted house is coming to Orlando and Hollywood. So you are more of the movie buff than I am. I know Sinners was a thing.
Oh God, yeah. I mean,
they won awards, right?
Academy Awards this past year. We actually talked this up a lot on podcast here at Jim Hill Media because, what was it? The costumes that were used in Sinners were originally done for that canceled Blade movie that Marvel was going to do. So, the gentleman who took home the Academy Award for playing the twins in this. This has been a very high-profile project for a while. So interesting that Universal is going to take it on. Do you want to describe the house? Or?
Well, so I don't know much about the movie. I didn't watch it. I didn't even know it was like horror. So when I saw that come through, I'm like, hold on, what is this? I thought it was, you don't hear like horror movies winning Academy Awards normally, right? It's in more artsy pieces and stuff like that. But essentially the guests are going to enter Club Juke. So the Juke joint is operated by the Smokestack Twins, where the story unfolds in a 1930s Mississippi time frame as vampires overrun the club during a night of music and celebration. So this is a vampire movie, and I was not aware of that.
Yeah.
So in 1930s Mississippi. So I can get behind that. That sounds like a fun time. If you're into the vampires and so forth. But it seems to me like it is kind of that's the vibe. That is what they're going. And it's the first big announcement of the year. So I think this is like, do you think this is like their big house, so to speak? Is that how that works?
Well, I mean, again, the whole notion of, as you mentioned, it's very rare that horror does as well at the annual awards as this one did. So it feels like this one out of the gate was chosen just for prestige and high profile. And it will be interesting to see what follows in its wake for the other shows at this year, or other houses at this year's Halloween Horror Night.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, and I don't know if you saw this, Jim, but they also announced that the actual tickets and tours for Hollywood came out. Did you see any of the pricing and information on that?
Yeah. I mean, I have to admit, it's, well, again, it's recognizing that, look, it's Hollywood. And so there are obviously lots of fans of the horror genre, and lots of different income levels. So, what is it? General admission starts at $77 and then just continues to climb on up, right?
Yeah, bear with us in some of this. I'll give you some of it, and you'll probably want to go to a website to get all the details. But there are a decent amount of bullet points here. But for those aware, like Jim said, general admission $77. Then you basically will have an after 2 p.m. like ticket allows guests with beginning at $117. So that gives you a couple extra hours. Then there is the frequent fear and ultimate fear passes, and that returns, and that is, I think it's all 35 nights, and it starts at $179, where the ultimate fear pass is access to every event night, and that begins at $299. And then there are a couple of premium add-ons and gives you access to Fast and Furious Hollywood Drift during that time.
Well, at least we know it'll be open by fall.
Right.
There we go. Okay.
And that starts at, I think it's called the RIP tour, the Rest in Peace tour, is $439, and that does include unlimited express pass, a guided tour, a gourmet meal, backlot trolley access, valet parking, and priority haunted house entry. So yeah, it goes anywhere from $77 to $439. And I believe they start in September, so they give us a couple extra days.
They do. And it's worth noting that, given that this year's, Halloween Horror Night out in Hollywood wraps up on November 1st, this is one of the longest Halloween horror seasons ever offered at that park. So lots of opportunities to go and check out the Sinner's House. So
Yeah. So that's what we know. So, and I remember this part of last year is that these houses come boom, 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 boom. Every week we'll probably have some type of announcement. So it'll be fun to kind of cover and see what's coming out on both coasts.
okay. Speaking of both coasts, we pivot now back to Orlando, where we have some interesting news about the Hagrid's Magical Creature Motorbike Adventure at Islands Adventure.
Yeah, Jim, this was hot off the press. I think yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I'm writing up the news. I'm like, Jim, I'm not going to send it until last minute because they always add stuff. Just a little snippet that basically says that Hagrid's is now taken quietly removed from the actual Orlando's Express Pass system. So you're no longer before you could do Express Pass with Hagrid's, but starting July 1st, you are no longer able to do that. So and lots of people are asking questions. Universal is giving you the pretty much candid response that this is good for guest traffic flow. And it's almost the same answer for everybody that's asking them on like X and these other different forums. But I think you can see people happy and other people that are like, no, I don't like this. What's your general thoughts, Jim? Do you have a opinion?
I've heard from friends that one of the secondary issues here is that Hagrid's continues to have some operational issues. And that, ultimately, when they would sell express passes and when they would finally get Hagrid's up and running for the day, they would, of course, have to compensate all of the folks who, again, had bought Express Pass, and which then restricted the number of day guests, which then, let's be honest, led to, complaining folks at guest relations at the parks. So evidently that is an issue, why we're seeing this change come as of July, that sort of leveling the playing field that, hey, you're in line, just like everybody else.
Right.
And when this attraction is operating, you get to ride it. But I mean, face it, Universal was making quite a bit of money off of being able to sell express passes for this. So, this was not a decision that was made casually.
Yeah. Well, I think that's been a lot of the argument is now the standby guest, because if you went to the park, if you didn't rope drop it, it was one of those things where you're going to wait entirely too long. It was just you either rope drop it or you don't go, or you buy Express Pass. And I think now it's a lot of people are feeling, well, I can get in the line midday and still have a chance to get on it without having to wait 3 hours. So, that's the big news and everybody's talking about it online.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And speaking of Universal Florida related news, with the mega movie parade isn't stepping off anytime soon, right?
Yeah. So I've been, I was fortunate enough. I think I saw this one twice. Have you seen this parade, Jim?
Not in person. I have seen a couple of videos of it, and like what I saw, I keep meaning to catch it when I'm in the park, but I'm always there at the wrong time.
Yeah, no, I love this parade. Granted, this was my first official Universal parade I've ever seen, so it's probably going to hold like a place in my heart. But it's it's a lot of cool tribute stuff. There's a great Jaws float, there's a great ET float, Ghostbusters, all the above. But online. It was supposed to return this week, but it's been pushed back to June 5th. So good news for me is I'll get to see it in a couple weeks anyway. But for those that, might have had this plan and we're just wondering, if there's any operational issues. And it seems like there might have been operational issues. I think it debuted in 2024. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it was like all put together when it first was supposed to come out. I think it was around July something in 2024. It was supposed to come together, but it wasn't like they staggered it out. So I don't know if this parade has issues and we're seeing more of it now.
Well, I think it was more a case of, a number of the vendors that had been hired to create things for the parade floats. I mean, remember that this initially came online in 2024, and the supply chains were still screwed up post-COVID, and this is where we kind of are. The fact that it's been delayed as much as it is tells you a lot about, the work that was done in the off-season on this parade, and the notion that we're still having trouble getting parts. So
yeah. So I mean, I'll look for it, but yeah, it's running a little shorter than it normally does, because if it's going to come out on June, I think it ends in August, like August 23rd. So, and before it would run even longer. So you only got a really short spot. It really is a summer parade. So if you're going to want to see it, and if this is something that's on your to-do list, you're going to have to make a summer trip there. And maybe they'll have, I mean, at that point in time when it ends, they're not going to have a little parade between this and Christmas, I'm sure. So there just won't be a parade.
No. Though, and speaking of summer, we have a brand new Steven Spielberg film coming from Universal Pictures in just a few weeks, Disclosure Day, which, by the way, my partner in crime over on the Fine Tuning podcast, Drew Taylor, has already seen this and just said wonderful things about it. It said it's the best thing Spielberg's done in years. So, and again, this is, if you think about, Mr. Spielberg and when he works the extraterrestrial side of the street, whether it's War of the Worlds or the original Close Encounters, or for that matter, E.T., he always delivers the goods. So Disclosure Day is going to be interesting, but especially interesting is that a Universal Orlando is going to have a Steven Spielberg summer tribute store, which walks us through his Universal filmography, right?
Yeah, this is probably one of my favorite things at the Universal, if I haven't said it before. I love their tribute stores. So this one is opening up, I'm assuming, and I saw a couple of the pictures. I mean, I think it's the one right across from the horror makeup show. So it's in that location there. But yeah, there is Jaws, E.T., Jurassic Park, and of course, Disclosure Day information. So if you go in there, the Jaws section has like storyboards and production photos. So it's kind of like a little museum for Spielberg. Did you get to see any pictures, or did you hear any more about this?
No. I mean, if anything, now another reason to return to that park. I mean, how long is this supposed to run?
I mean, they don't last long. I mean, this is going to be, they'll probably tear it apart before the Halloween Horror Nights. So I would say, with August. So once again, it's going to probably be about the same time as the parade. But yeah, there's the ET room, and that showcases some of like I think it has the ET's animatronic arm and like a created bike scene suspended overhead. Jurassic Park has the authentic props. It has like the night vision goggles. It looks like some of the costumes actually worn by Jeff Goldblum and Laura Dern's character. And of course, once again, they're going to be talking about Disclosure Day, which is opening here in June 12th. And I did get to see the trailer, and it was out in front of Mando in Grogu. So I got to see the trailer there, and I didn't know what it was at first. But yeah, I'm not sure what's going on in this movie, but I like everything that Drew seems to like. It seems like we're cut of a similar cloth. So if he's saying it's great, it might be one of those that, I don't know the last time I saw a Spielberg movie in the theaters, but it might be one that we go check out.
Yeah, and the one thing that Drew said, and the interesting thing is the trailer shows you a lot of nothing.
Right.
And that's the thing. He says once you see the movie, you understand that they basically keep the last third of the movie hidden from sight. So, all will become clear with Disclosure Day when you finally buy a ticket and see it in theaters. And speaking of tickets, we have information finally about the Universal Kids Resort in Frisco, Texas. Sort of.
Do we, Jim? Yeah, sort of. Exactly. Sort of. So there was leaked ticket information that came out. Now, I will give props to Universal Kids Parent Guide on Instagram, because I followed this account, and they have been primarily just showcasing all the information about this resort, and they scooped it out. There must be some type of ticketing website called Klook, KLOOK, and they were searching around, and they found a one-day admission ticket that started at $64.95, and then it also peaked to $79. So it looked like it was adjustable prices based off the day, and so they found that, and that was all right. Some ticket information, and then then later on, somebody found that on, I think it was the official Instagram account for Universal Kids accidentally leaked saying grand opening July 1st, and they immediately pulled all this stuff back. So seems like somebody on the social media team was a little trigger happy or accidentally took a draft and put it in post mode. July, Jim, that gives us like a month of like notice. It just seems like you would give way more notice for something like that, right?
Well, now remember, this is Universal sticking its toe in the regional theme park market. I mean, and of course, some might argue that the original Universal Studios Hollywood is a regional theme park. I mean, if you consider Disneyland in Anaheim, the
Right.
world's most famous regional theme park, that argument. But yeah, just getting the door open for the first summer at this point, I think is the point. I mean, remember, the original Disneyland didn't open till the middle of July,
Yeah.
back in 55. So, just you got to get on the board, and then it's a question of, marching forward through your year. And remember, that's the other thing about Universal Kids. If the playbook from both Hollywood and Orlando is followed, we will get special programming for Halloween. We will get special programming for Christmas. Not sure what the first quarter of 2027 might hold, but no, I'm just happy to hear that. Okay, we kind of know a ballpark of when this thing is going to open, and that means that you, me, and Lauren can plan a trip. So.
Right. Well, I also did see that one of the Trolls characters did throw out like the first pitch at like a Rangers game, which is in Texas. So maybe they're gearing up. I don't know.
Well, I love that too. Okay, that's a great sign as well.
Well, we'll see. We'll keep an eye. Our trips. Listen, if we're not busy enough, we're gonna have to figure out how to get to all these places. And we're just trying to shoehorn in Philly. That's the key right now, is to figure out where and when Philly, because that is September countdown. So we will have a show, and we'll talk about that here within the summer.
That we will. But for now, that wraps up this week's news segment. But when we get back, we're going to take advantage of the fact that we've got an anniversary coming up for Back to the Future: The Ride, and going to talk about the creation of that motion-based simulator attraction in a moment. But first, this.
All new drinks are now at McDonald's, with refreshers like the Strawberry Watermelon Refresher and the Mango Pineapple Refresher with popping boba, to crafted sodas like the Sprite Berry Blast with berry flavors and cold foam. Who knew ice-cold drinks could be so fire? Try them all now at McDonald's.
Refreshers contain caffeine. Copyright 2026, The Coca-Cola Company. Sprite is a registered trademark of The Coca-Cola Company.
Have you ever rearranged your furniture and discovered the carpet underneath looks brand new while the rest of it looks, well, not so new? It's time for a carpet upgrade. At the Home Depot, we have stylish choices at simple prices from all the top brands. Best of all, we can install it for you, starting at only 49 cents per square foot. So all you have to do is pick your perfect floor. Start your carpet project today at the Home Depot. How doers get more done. Exclusions apply for licenses. See homedepot.com/license numbers.
Expedia and Visit Scotland invite you to come step into centuries of history that await in Scotland. Castles steeped in legend, walk along cobblestone streets. Come share the warmth of stories passed down through generations. This is a place with a past that is fully present today and all yours to explore. Plan your Scottish escape today at expedia.com/Visit Scotland.
And we're back. All right. So, Eric, I apologize because I feel like you're kind of at a disadvantage when I talk about Back to the Future: The Ride, because you've only experienced the attraction that went in place of it. The Simpsons ride, right?
Yeah, Simpsons ride, and I've watched a couple, documentaries or at least POV versions of the old Back to the Future ride on YouTube, but that's about it.
Okay. But, now the original Back to the Future: The Ride opened at Universal Studios Hollywood 35 years ago this month, May of 1991. And of course, that simulator attraction came on the heels of the enormous success of the first Back to the Future film, which Universal Pictures released at theaters back in July of 85. But what's kind of interesting about this is that not just that simulator attraction, Back to the Future the ride, but also Star Tours actually owes a lot of its success to something else that debuted back in 1985. And that, Eric, was Tour of the Universe. And this was a space shuttle themed simulator ride that was located in the basement level of the CN Tower. Are you aware of the CN Tower at all?
No, Jim. I'm looking at that. I'm like, did you forget a letter? Because I know of the CNN Tower. Like, I knew that was in it. But what is the CN Tower?
The CN Tower was built in Toronto back in the 70s. In fact, officially opened to the public June of 1976. We'll be celebrating its 50th anniversary next month. And for a time was the largest freestanding structure in the world. It was 1,815 feet tall. And the initial thinking was, in Canada, well, that's enough to get people to come out, right? Big, tall building, climb up, see the spectacular views. But what wound up happening is after a couple of years, the folks who operated the structure realized, we need to give people a reason to linger in the area more to the point, maybe return to the CN Tower. So, and they had all of this space at the bottom of the building that was available for development, especially the basement. And this was also during the time when Canadians were taking great pride in the fact that all of the shuttles that NASA was sending up into space featured SRMS, and that stands for the Shuttle Remote Manipulator System, which is a fancy way, Eric, of saying big mechanical arm, which had been built up in Canada under the direction of the country's Research Council. So using that technological advances, this product of Canadian know-how, and by the way, that's why the people who made it kind of insisted that the folks at NASA call it the Canadarm. This is one of those words where it's like, how the hell do I pronounce this? It's Canadair, Canadarm. I can't do it.
Yeah.
But anyway, so this is why the folks who run the CN Tower are like, well, all right, let's build an attraction, basement of the building. Let's make it space shuttle themed. And this attraction eventually becomes known as Tour of the Universe. And this is what I love about this. It's like it was supposed to replicate what commercial space travel would be like during the far-off year of 2019. Which is when a citizen of Canada could book passage to one of the moons of Jupiter. And by the way, Eric, hour-long experience, kind of modeled after the airport. So you first have to go through customs, and now because you're going off-world, you also have to be immunized, and so there's these faux medical vignettes as you move through a queue that's highly themed and vaguely futuristic.
This is the whole thing, Jim. Like literally an hour long. You're like, hey, we're going to go through all this.
But at the end, you board you board a simulator. In fact, here's where it gets fascinating. The very same simulators that are used for the original version of Star Tours, made by a technology-based company in the UK, they developed these things to train both commercial pilots and the guys who fly the jets for the military. And I want to stress here, same exact thing that Disney used. In fact, my pal Mark Eads was the guy who flew over to the UK and, climbed into one of these and came back and evangelized to all the Imagineers about, we need to use this in the park. So many people say, oh, Tony Baxter invented Star Tours. It's like, well, yeah, but the guy who found the tech and brought it to Imagineer, that's Mark Eads. He deserves credit. But the other thing that's important to understand here is that Tour of the Universe got there first. They soft opened their simulator-based attraction in 1985, and then after tinkering with the pre-show elements, because as Eric pointed out, really, I'm in a queue for an hour.
You're giving me shots.
There we go. All right, that they finally opened this thing to the public the following year, 1986. Tickets for adults were $10, kids $4. Whereas Disney Star Tours, the one in Anaheim, doesn't open until January of 87. So it's the following year, whereas the Walt Disney World version, well, that doesn't open until more than 2 years later, December of 89. So if Tour of the Universe is the first motion-based simulator, why isn't it talked about more today? Why do we talk about Star Tours? Why do we talk about Back to the Future, the Ride, or for a lesser extent, Body Wars? And it's like, the explanation's simple, Eric, that this elaborately themed attraction in the basement of the CN Tower closed in 1992 after a relatively brief 6-year run. More to the point, Tour of the Universe closes between when Back to the Future the Ride opens at Universal Studios Florida, May of 91, and the West Coast version opens out in Universal Studios Hollywood in June of 93. Now, it's worth noting, though, that Back to the Future the Ride and Tour of the Universe do share a connection, given that the ride films for both of these attractions were created by the very same man, visual effects visionary Doug Trumbull. And what I love about Trumbull is he learned the visual effects trade at his dad's knee. In fact, Douglas Trumbull Sr. worked for Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer back in the golden age of Hollywood. In fact, Trumbull Sr. is, how about this as a job out in Hollywood? He was the guy with the fishing pole that had a teeny tiny piece of monofilament on it that was connected to Bert Lahr's tail when he was dressed as the Cowardly Lion in the 1939 version of Wizard of Oz. So anytime in that movie when you see the Cowardly Lion's tail flick back and forth, that's because Doug's dad is up in a catwalk high above that soundstage moving a fishing pole. And in fact, I once got to interview Doug, and he said his dad was equally proud of the scenes in The Wizard of Oz with the flying monkeys, because he also worked on those. So Doug follows his dad into the visual effects business. In fact, starts out in his 20s working for the exact same studio, MGM, on Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. In fact, he's the guy who dreamed up the Stargate effect in that Academy Award-winning film, and Universal is so pleased what they say. It's like, hey, we got a special effects movie coming up, The Andromeda Strain. You want to come work on that for us? So he walks across the street from MGM to Universal, works on The Andromeda Strain. Universal is so thrilled with what he does with the effects for that film. He says, hey, would you like to direct a whole special effects movie? And he does Silent Running with Bruce Dern, which today is considered one of the seminal sci-fi films of the 1970s, especially for its effects work. And on the heels of that, Eric, Trumbull, for a hot minute, is suddenly Hollywood's go-to guy when it comes to visual effects. I mean, 20th Century Fox and Warner Brothers say, hey, can you come help us with the Towering Inferno? George Lucas actually goes to Doug and says, hey, I saw what you did in Silent Running. I got a lot of spaceships in this Star Wars thing that I'm making. Can you come help me with this? And Doug says no, because he's like, no, I've done 2001, I've done Silent Running, I've done spaceships, and this is what actually forces Lucas to set up ILM. It's like,
man,
yeah.
Well, that's one. Listen, if he would have said yes, the whole world could have been different. How about that?
Exactly. Now, we were just talking about Spielberg earlier in today's show in Close Encounters. Spielberg hears that Trumbull turned Lucas down for Star Wars, so he goes to him and says, well, I'm making this movie about UFOs. I mean, do you want to make UFOs? And oh, no, that interests me. So, all right, so he goes and does Close Encounters of a Third Kind. And then Paramount comes at him and waves a very big check and says, I know it's spaceships, but it's Star Trek. Would you do our Star Trek the motion picture? And so he's like, all right, it's a very big check. I will come make your movie. But on the heels of that project, Eric, Doug, he begins working on, it's like he then goes to work on Blade Runner. I mean, it's the Ridley Scott's Blade Runner. But he eventually walks away from that movie because he's now feeling burned out by the way executive and Hollywoods are handling visual effects at the time, which is you hire people, but you hire them when you really don't have enough time on a project to do a good job. And so the only way you can get anything done is you brutalize these people. You make them work 7 days a week for months at a time to meet crushing deadlines so that these films can then come out for previously announced release dates. And people on the other side of it are exhausted and burned out. And that's what Doug was at this point. He's burned out. So he leaves the movie business and he then buys, a rope mill in Western Massachusetts, where he then plots what he hopes will be the future of Hollywood. And we'll get to how Back to the Future the ride factors into all of that in a moment. But first, this.
Get business done with the new American Express Graphite Business Cash Unlimited card. With unlimited 2% cash back on all eligible purchases, unlimited 5% cash back on flights and prepaid hotels booked through American Express Travel Online, and a flexible spending capacity that can grow with your business, you'll have the confidence to keep building. Apply today and earn a welcome offer of $1,500 cash back after you spend $50,000 in qualifying purchases on your new card within the first 6 months of card membership. Terms apply. Learn more at go.amex/graphite.
This episode is brought to you by Redfin. You're listening to a podcast, which means you're probably multitasking. Maybe even scrolling home listings on Redfin, saving homes without expecting to get them. But Redfin isn't just built for endless browsing. It's built to help you find and own a home. With agents who close twice as many deals, when you find the one, you've got a real shot at getting it. Get started at redfin.com. Own the dream.
And we're back. A quick question, Eric. Of these movies, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Close Encounters you've seen, right?
Listen, I've actually seen a lot of these. The problem with me, Jim, is I've seen these movies and then I kind of let them go to the point where I don't remember anything about them. So then I watch them again like I've never seen them before. So I've seen all of these movies. Do I remember much about them? No.
That's okay. That's okay. It's interesting. Nancy and I were having the same discussion in the car driving home from Mandalorian and Grogu. It's like, what was the plot of it? But anyway, okay, back now to Doug Trumbull. And again, after working nonstop on visual effects blockbusters like Space Odyssey, Towering Inferno, Close Encounters, Star Trek the Motion Picture, the guy's burned out. So he gets as far away from Hollywood as he could possibly get. And like I said, he buys this old rope mill out in Western Massachusetts, where he then uses this weird collection of oddly shaped buildings, which, by the way, built back in the 1800s, as a place to experiment with ideas for the future of cinema. And Doug decides that based on the way the public responded to the Stargate scenes in 2001: A Space Odyssey, and to a lesser extent the V'ger scenes in Star Trek the Motion Picture, that the future lies in movie-based experiences rather than movies themselves. So when the Tour of the Universe folks come calling in the mid-1980s looking for a ride film to show inside of their motion-based simulator, and again, remember, we're going to the moons of Jupiter in the far-off year of 2019. Trumbull says yes, if only because he will then, he gets to use other people's money to play around with large format film, like IMAX and 70 millimeter. And that, by the way, is the key to Trumbull's way of thinking, that to sell the idea to an audience that they aren't looking at a screen, they're not watching a movie, but they're looking through a window into the depths of space. They need to be looking at the clearest possible image on the biggest possible screen, which back then, anyway, is 70 millimeter and IMAX. But to sell this idea that you're not then looking at a piece of film, but at something real, well, there can be no obvious edits.
Right.
Okay, so I bring this up because when Doug was working on the Ride film for Back to the Future, the Ride, first of all, he took, it's a rope mill, all right? You have all of these long, thin buildings because you're binding rope. So he took advantage of these long, thin buildings that he acquired when he bought the rope mill in the Berkshires. And Eric, I was lucky enough to be invited up to visit Trumbull while he was working on the Hill Valley scene for Back to the Future, the Ride. And for those of you who don't remember, this is set in the futuristic version of Hill Valley from 2015. It's the one that you get to see in Back to the Future Part 2 with the flying cars.
Yeah. Remember 11 years ago, guys, when we had flying cars that
There
time,
we go.
right?
There we go. Or 2019, where we could book those trips to the moons of Jupiter.
Right.
There we go. And by the way, so he sets up this model in a rope mill, with the notion that the camera can then pass over all of these models. And by the way, there's a reason this scene in Back to the Future, the Ride is set at night, because if the lights were on, you would have been able to see to either side of the model were the brick walls of that narrow building at the rope mill. But anyway, the Omnimax camera traveling over the model gives you the perspective that you're chasing Biff, who's in his own flying car, as he zooms over that cityscape. Now, weird little bend on the story. Trumbull is actually the second guy to do a Back to the Future, the Ride film. The first company that Universal Parks and Resorts hires. And by the way, the first Ride film was actually in production when Back to the Future Part 2 and Back to the Future Part 3 was being shot. Had nothing to do with those Robert Zemeckis movies. In fact, that had a very different take on this theme park adventure. There was no Biff. There was no DeLorean being stolen. You had things like Doc Brown sending you back to his own favorite moments in time, like you arrived at Kitty Hawk at the moment that Orville and Wilbur got their early plane prototype off the ground. But here's the thing. You startled them and they crash it. And you accidentally launch a new timeline. Mm-hmm. And when you return to the future, there are no prop planes. There are no jets. Instead, everybody is traveling by bicycle-powered Zeppelins. Anyway, this was the version of that ride that was supposed to debut at Hollywood in the Universal Park out there. In fact, interesting thing, construction had actually begun on the theater that would house this attraction. This was going to be the upper lot of, again, the Hollywood Park on top of the Frankenstein parking structure. Work began in 1989. In fact, what's fascinating is if you can get your hands on a park map for that summer, they actually indicate where the work is happening, and they note on the map that Back to the Future, the Ride is coming soon to Universal Studios Hollywood. Unfortunately, as they're building this, structural engineers suddenly raise their hand and go, wait a minute, you're building Back to the Future, the Ride on top of a parking structure? This is earthquake country, and those things, the motion-based simulators, you're going to have 12 in each theater, and you're going to have 2 theaters, so 24 of these things moving at one time. that's going to put quite the dynamic load on that building. And it's like, no, you can't build it there. And so they literally have to stop construction, and eventually the project gets moved to the entirely different side of the upper lot. In fact, it's built into the hillside that overlooks the load unload area for the tram tour, but with some pretty sturdy foundation work there. But anyway, back to the Future, the ride. This is obviously a rush job for Trumbull's Ride Film Company, but it did carry over a number of concepts from the original Ride film. I mean, for example, in that first version of Back to the Future, the ride, there was a moment where when you were in your DeLorean, plunged over Niagara Falls, and Trumbull kept that idea, but went one better. In his version of Back to the Future ride, when you plunge over a waterfall, it's a waterfall made entirely out of lava, Eric. So,
yeah, because you go back to the prehistoric area, right?
You do,
right? There's dinosaurs and stuff.
Yeah. But anyway, Trumbull takes everything he learned from working on Tour of the Universe for CN Tower and Back to the Future, the ride for Universal Studios, and applies that to his next project, which is The Secrets of the Luxor Pyramid. This is an experience. This is a trio of interconnected simulator-based experiences that opened at the Luxor Hotel and Casino in October of 1993. By the way, right on the heels of Back to the Future, the ride finally opening at Universal Studios Hollywood, again on the other side of the upper lot. Now, Eric, Lauren, and the rest of the Hersey clan and I visited the 30-story tall Luxor Hotel and Casino back in March of this year. In fact, the irony here is we actually caught the Wizard of Oz experience at the Sphere while we were in town. And just so you know, folks, their flying monkeys, weren't dangling from wires, controlled by Doug's dad up in the, the catwalk. They did drone technology, right? I mean,
it was interesting. I mean, from our viewpoint, it was just like, all right, that looks cool if you were sitting down there, but there was no wires, no tail moving,
Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, and what was interesting about the Luxor Hotel and Casino is there were elements of the secret of the Luxor pyramid experience still in place from the hotel. In fact, Eric and I peered over the edge of this 30-story tall hotel down into the atrium and looked at, some of the buildings that are still in place that housed elements of this. But it didn't run all that long. And to be honest, it didn't run all that long because it committed the cardinal sin of Vegas. It prevented people from gambling. But anyway, to bring this segment to a close, we lost Doug Trumbull back in February of 2022 at the age of 79. And I am still incredibly grateful that I got invited to come check out what he was working on in the rope mill back in the late 80s, early 90s. I was living in Massachusetts at the time, drove out to the Berkshires, to visit his setup there, and just saw some flat out amazing stuff. And but yeah, Eric, at some point we're going to have to figure out a way to talk about the stuff at the Luxor, because that was a fun visit. That was
absolutely, yeah. No, I mean that's insane. Number one, like you being in the place that actually was shot, and you're talking about a rope mill, and I'm thinking to myself, what the heck is a rope mill? And all right, there has to be a place out there that makes ropes,
Mm-hmm.
So
yep. Well, that's the thing that they design. I mean, they are, I want to say, an eighth of a mile long, where you just and you start with strands at one end of the building, and you just create these length of rope. And it just, you never think about, well, that there had to be a place to make rope, and this is how you did it. But he was the one who looked at this and thought, I can put a camera in this narrow space, and I can put things in front of me that the camera can travel over, and I can create a dimensional film experience, especially with 70 millimeter and Omnimax. that'll just blow your mind. And that's what he did. So
That's quite amazing. And just to everyone know out there that I'm not super uncultured. I did look up the CN Tower, and I do know what that is. I just didn't know the official name. So, but we also know if they don't have any rope mills, you can just build rope from the top all the way down now. So I think that's the new technology. So all comes together. That's how we're building ropes nowadays, all the way to the basement.
All the way to the basement. Okay, and with that, folks, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Epic Universal Podcast. By the way, if you have topics or suggestions for future, stories we're going to tell, like Rainfred, who wants us to talk about the Universal Monsters Cafe, which is an excellent idea, by the way. I'll get to work on that right now. But yeah, feel free to send those along to myself and Mr. Hersey via social media. But for now, want to thank you for listening to this week's show, and we will be back next week with a brand new edition of the Epic Universal Podcast.